whenever you're ready. There we go. Thanks. So first, welcome to the Small Grant Program Rulemaking Advisory Committee meeting. This is the kickoff meeting for this RAC. We really appreciate all the RAC members for participating and joining today. I thought we'd kick off with a little bit of introductions. So we have a number of OWEB staff and Rulemaking Advisory Committee or RAC members, and see a few other folks here as well that aren't on the RAC. Going to assume you're here to observe and potentially make public comment, which will come here a little bit later in the meeting. So I'll call on OWEB staff and RAC members for introductions. And if you don't mind just saying your name, organization you represent, and maybe a little bit about what you do at your organization. So I'll start. My name is Eric Hartstein, policy coordinator here at OWEB. So I do a number of things for the agency, including the coordination of the rulemaking activities. I work in our FIP program and then do a little bit on the legislative side of the agency. With that, I'll just kind of go around and call on people as I see you on my Hollywood squares. So go to Kathy next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Leopold, OWEB Small Grant Program Coordinator.
Thanks, Kathy. Kelly.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kelly Timchak. I'm the coordinator down in Gold Beach for the Lower Rogue Watershed Council, and I work with the South Coast Watershed Council and the Curry SWCD as the Curry Watersheds Partnership.
Thanks, Kelly. Welcome. Let's go to Kaylee.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Sowers. I'm the district manager for the Coos Soil and Water Conservation District.
Right, thanks, Kaylee. Andy.
Hi, Andy Gallagher. I'm the district manager for the Kirk County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Good to see you, Andy. Let's go, Eric.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you today. Eric Williams, Grant Program Manager at OWEB. The programs that I work with include our open solicitation program, our focused investment partnership initiative, and our small grants program. Good to see you all here.
Thanks, Eric. Let's go to Jordan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Anderson. I'm a resource conservationist with the Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District, and I work on water quality issues.
Welcome, Jordan. Ivy.
Hi, my name is Ivy Clark-Henry. I am an admin specialist with OWEB.
Thanks, Ivy. Let's go to Zach next.
Hi, folks. My name is Zach Mallon. I'm the director and sole employee of the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council.
Thanks, Zach. How about Nori?
Hi, my name is Nori Wright, and I'm the office manager at the Gillum County Soil and Water Conservation District and the lead for the Small Grant Team 16.
Okay, welcome, Nori. Karen.
I'm Karen Stutzman. I'm the Soil and Water Conservation District Program lead for the state, which is administered by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I help coordinate the program for board and staff for SWCDs, trainings, business operations, things like that.
Okay, welcome, Karen. Let's go to Nicole.
Good afternoon, Nicole Sullivan, Owyhee Watershed Council Coordinator, and also the lead for the Owyhee Team 23 Small Grants.
Great, thanks for joining, Nicole. And Cassie.
I'm Cassie Newton. I'm the district manager for Wheeler Soil and Water Conservation District.
Great, welcome, Cassie. Did I miss anybody on the rack? Okay, not seeing anybody raise their hand. And yep, just saw your message, Andy. That's okay. Okay. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. If I can get there. There you go. Okay, so just a quick overview of the afternoon here. So we just did our welcome introductions. I'll give a little bit of some background here in a moment on the role of the RAC and a little bit more on the context around broader rulemaking. And then I'll turn it over to Eric and Kathy to give some background on the small grant program itself, which I know you all are quite cognizant of, otherwise you probably wouldn't be on the RAC, but also give a little more context on the process that led to the current rulemaking within the program. So we'll take a break after that, and then we'll dig into the potential revisions that we've started to discuss as staff. We sent out a draft earlier over email, and we have it posted on our website. This is really looking at the first few sections of the small grant program rules. So our sections 10 through 30 in the rules. We'll take another break. We'll see if there's any public comments at that time, and then we'll wrap up and get everybody out of here by 4 o'clock. So any questions off the bat here? Okay. Okay, so a little bit of background on the role of the RAC and some context for rulemaking. So what is an Oregon administrative rule? So administrative rules are created by agencies and boards and commissions to implement and interpret their statutory authority. So it kind of varies across the executive enterprise on how rules get adopted. Sometimes you don't have to bring them to the boards or commissions for the adoption of rules. Sometimes agencies can just do it as with their authority. With OWEB, and I'll get into this in a little bit, we do need to have our board adopt administrative rules. Once that does occur, our administrative rules are filed with the Oregon Secretary of State, and they are available for viewing online. See here a little screenshot of our rules. I took this from the Secretary of State's webpage. The rulemaking itself is a fairly formal process, so it includes the OWEB board initiating rulemaking, OWEB staff developing a rulemaking advisory committee to discuss potential changes to the rules, public comment periods on final draft rules, as well as review by our agency Department of Justice counsel to make sure that any rules that we do plan on bringing forward to the board fall within our statutory authority. And ultimately, if that all goes swimmingly, we have approval by the OWEB board. So really what this hopefully gives a little taste of is that when combined with Oregon statute or laws, administrative rules are really at the heart of what we do as an agency. So the rulemaking process is really important in how we kind of drive agency policy. So hope you all are as excited about this as I am. I think it's a really cool opportunity as a way to really help implement policy at the agency level. So how does OWEB use administrative rules? So we use them to interpret statute, to describe solicitation, review, funding decisions, and administration of agency grant programs. The bulk of our rules are around agency grant programs, essentially. We do have some other ones, but by and large, those are adopted early on when the agency was kind of being formed and really kind of drive the other side of the agency that has less to do with the actual grant programs. So, which raises the question, do all OWEB grant programs have separate administrative rules? And we're getting there, almost. The grant programs that do not have their own separate rule divisions are operated under the OWEB grant program rules, or Division 5, which are sort of the umbrella rules on which all of the OWEB grant program rules reside. So how does OWEB make administrative rules? So as I alluded to earlier, OWEB board initiates rulemaking if there's existing rules that they would like to be amended, or if new rules need to be developed for existing grant programs or for new ones. And following that, staff form a rulemaking advisory committee or a RAC to help develop rule language to ultimately bring back to the OWEB board for adoption. So what does the RAC do? So you serve as an advisory body to OWEB with the role of providing advice and framing policy choices to the agency. So ultimately, OWEB retains the rulemaking authority, but we really strive to achieve consensus through the RAC process in a way that seeks to understand, hopefully, the interests of everyone here, and we work together to find workable solutions if there's disagreement. Statute also requires us to seek your recommendations on whether potential rule changes will have a fiscal impact, what the extent of that impact will be, and whether the rule will have a significant adverse impact on small businesses. And we don't think that any of the proposed or ultimate revisions to the small grant rules will have a fiscal impact if history is any guide. But please do keep this in mind as we go through the potential revisions, and be sure to bring it up in our discussions if you're thinking this potential rule change might have a adverse impact when it comes to small businesses. So this RAC, like all of our RACs, are comprised of individuals that represent the interests of persons most likely to be impacted by the rules. So in this case, we have applicants and grantees, grant reviewers, other agency partners, and we've really done our best to try to get representatives from across the state, from different sized organizations, and focus in the work that you do. I know there's folks here that do a lot of upland work, people that do more in-stream work or riparian work, and people that probably do all of the above. So with that, we really just hope to have some rich discussions today and really moving forward, and really honestly value the input that you're going to be providing here as a part of this RAC. Okay, stop sharing. see if there are any questions on kind of that broad overview of the RAC and rulemaking process before turning it over to Kathy and Eric. Okay, seeing none, turn it over. I don't know, Kathy or Eric, if you're going to be presenting first, or if you want to share a screen.
Sure, I could start if that's okay, Eric.
Mhm.
I have just a few slides. I'd start with just a big thank you to everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. And understanding that you are all familiar with the program, I'll keep this brief, but just provide a little background to kind of center us here. So in 1999, OWEB received a budget note from the legislature directing the agency to investigate development of a county-based program to fund conservation practices on lands in agriculture, timber, urban, and other uses, which contribute to water quality improvements, water savings, soil erosion control, vegetative habitat and riparian improvements, and other processes related to the implementation of the Clean Water Act and the Oregon Plan. Around that same time, OWEB was looking for ways to be more responsive to small, straightforward restoration projects that weren't necessarily competing well in the regular grant program ranking process. So in January of 2002, the board adopted administrative rules establishing the small grant program, and the first project grants were awarded shortly after that. To date, more than 3,500 project grants have been awarded, and more than $25 million have been directed towards on-the-ground restoration projects around the state. Let's see here. There we go. This slide shows the goals that were adopted by the board when the program was developed. I won't read all of these, but I did want to highlight a couple points here. As typical with other restoration grant offerings, the small grant program goals include supporting the Oregon Plan for salmon and watersheds and improving water quality and wildlife habitat. Other goals include the incorporation of local input into the prioritization of resource concerns to be addressed for a biennium and the streamlined nature of many aspects of the program. And finally, I would highlight the goal of encouraging partnerships. The small grant program does this first through the small grant team format, which brings together representatives from watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and tribes who work together on the team. And the second phase or second interaction is the partnerships that applicants build with landowners that are implementing the projects. The sheer number of small grants executed per biennium demonstrates the large number of landowners engaged in restoration work alongside the councils, districts, and tribal grantees. So in establishing the 28 small grant areas around the state, the board created that opportunity for a locally driven program in each area. As I mentioned, small grant teams are currently comprised of representatives from watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and tribes working within the boundaries of a small grant area. Each small grant team must have representation from at least one council and one district in order to reorganize for the biennium. Participation on the small grant team is voluntary, and that team work is not funded with small grant program dollars currently. Small grant teams reorganize each biennium, adopting operating procedures and bylaws, outlining how the team will function for the biennium, as well as identifying the priority watershed concerns that they'd like to address, or prioritizing those watershed concerns and the eligible project types most likely to address those concerns. The watershed concern categories include fish passage, urban impact reduction, in-stream, riparian, wetland, and upland process and function categories, along with water quantity, quality, and irrigation efficiency projects and private road impact reduction. Under those broad categories, rule further identifies specific eligible project types, For example, an eligible project within the fish passage category would be removing irrigation or push-up dams or removing and replacing a culvert. Each watershed concern has a list of eligible project types attached to it.
Hey, Kathy, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt, but I'm only seeing the top half of each slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm not sure if
that
it's
better?
something with a view setting or something else.
Can you see it all now?
Yes, now I can see down to the
Oh,
last
I'm
bullet I can
sorry.
see is tribes. Is that the last bullet?
That is the last
Okay.
bullet on the last slide. So here we go.
Okay. Sorry
Uh,
about that.
They were kind of extra, but thank you for noting that. And I'm sure most folks are aware of these little basic facts about the program. Small project grants may request up to 15,000 in OWEB funding for those rule-defined eligible on-the-ground restoration projects. Projects must cite and use technical guidance from at least one of the sources approved by OWEB. And currently, small grant applicants are watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and tribes only. These entities act on behalf of landowners to apply for and shepherd a project through the OWEB processes. And so with that, I'll stop. And I'm happy to answer any background questions. And thanks again for participating in the rule revision process.
Okay, not seeing any questions. Thanks, Kathy. Eric, were you going to talk a little bit about kind of how we got from or came to this point in time with the OWEB board wanting to initiate rulemaking for the small grant program, or is that, or if you'd like, I could do that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Thanks.
Okay.
I think for those of you that have watched our board over the years, particularly in recent years, the small grant topic has come up, and I think sometimes the board is looking at it in the context of, you know, are there organizations, communities that maybe aren't that familiar with OWEB, and is the small grant program an appropriate place for those organizations to get familiar with OWEB's granting process? And we've always talked about the program that way, more in terms of landowners getting familiar with what exactly is this watershed restoration business, what does it look like, and helping through smaller projects, people in their watersheds to understand, you know, what the restoration needs are, and hopefully over the longer term be supportive of larger scale efforts like that. And another piece of it is that roughly every 5 years or so, well, actually we're required every 5 years to review our rules to see if they're in need of updating. And it's been a little bit more than that for the small grant program rules. And so there's been a recognition that we probably need to open up the rules to see what needs to be adjusted there. And from the board's perspective, I think looking at it through the lens of making sure that we're providing equitable opportunities for anyone who's got eligible projects to be able to participate in the program. I think particularly some of the newer board members were a little bit surprised when we talked about the structure of it and what the rules say about, you know, who are the eligible applicants. And Kathy's last slide had them on there, the councils, districts, and tribes. And, you know, the board asked, well, what about other organizations? You know, how do they participate in the program? And so, you know, I think they're going to be looking for some proposed changes through this RAC process to help provide more equitable opportunities for folks out there to participate in the program. And I think it's also a good opportunity for those of you that have been working within the program, in some cases for a good number of years, to look for places that you think, you know, we might need to update, modernize, tweak, you know, the language that's in there to help you do your work better. So I think that we on the staff, and I think most of our board members, understand that basically we're not anything without the work that you all do. And so that's one of the main reasons that the whole RAC process is structured around those who are active participants in the program, providing input to proposed policy and rule changes. So, I think that equity piece is going to be really important for us to pay attention to. The board will be looking for it. And I think if we proposed revisions to them that didn't address that, they probably would send it back and say, do some more work on it. So I think with the minds that we have in this virtual room, we can do that really effectively. I know that you all have so much experience and knowledge of the places that you work and how to get things done on the ground. And so that's kind of the board perspective that we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, so that you knew some of those things that our board was interested in. Eric, anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's a really good kind of overview of what brought us here today. And you'll see that in this draft and future drafts as well, there's going to be a whole lot of other language that we'd like the RAC to weigh in on, beyond the eligible applicant pool for the small grant program. Any questions so far? Okay. Well, we're moving at a pretty good clip right now. So I'm going to suggest we have a break scheduled at 2. I'd like to have a break before we get into the draft rules. So why don't we take a 15-minute break now and reconvene at 1:45.
your door was shut and I stopped the video right here in front of your door. So I'm gonna open the door and then I'm gonna come in and go like this. And then I'm just gonna put it back on my face and then turn it off.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be in just a second. Okay.
Okay, so we are at 1:45. So why don't we begin with potential rule revisions. Kathy, if you don't mind, if you want to share your screen with the Word document. Great.
Hopefully that's showing correctly this time. Sorry.
No, it's perfect. Good. Okay. So as we walk through these first few sections, we've identified as OWEB staff, obviously some areas where we'd like to focus on. But as Eric alluded to a little bit earlier, if there's areas that you're seeing might need some improvement in the language or how these rules are impacting the work that you are doing on the ground, by all means, let's bring it up today or at future RAC meetings and discuss, because we really value your insights and the important experience that you bring to this process. So we'll start with, I'll just call it section 10, titled the Small Grant Program. So one area that we highlighted here is in F, which is encourage partnerships among watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, and tribes. And this is kind of a placeholder highlight, as we'll get to some language later on that if we're, as we talked about, broadening the applicant pool for small grants, we might want to broaden the language here as well. But for now, it's a bit of a placeholder. And Kelly, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the placeholder, and I'm thinking, is that because it's in like reference to who is getting these grants? I'm assuming yes. Okay, because otherwise I would think it would say more like landowners and, you know, local, state, and federal partners. Like it's, you know, the grants are bigger than just the councils and districts. So depends on who you're talking about. Yeah.
I'm curious what other folks have to think on that. I was nodding my head as you were saying, like, yes, applicants, but also in my mind, yes, it's broader. That would include landowners, other organizations that or agencies that would not be potentially eligible for OWEB grants. But we can get back to that as well.
Eric, this is Karen Stutzman.
Yeah.
Sorry, are we discussing these things now or just reviewing them a little bit?
I think with this one, it's a placeholder because we're going to get, I think, down to a little bit to a more meatier topic, but keep this in maybe the back of your mind for now, as we kind of engage on that meatier topic of applicant eligibility.
Okay, so yeah. Do you want comment as we go through then, or are we just kind of going to go through all the places and then? Sorry.
No, it's a good question. If you have a comment here, be sure to raise it. I don't think we're going to do wordsmithing on this quite yet, though. Okay. So Kathy, once you're done there, yeah. So we're going to move down to definitions. this section is really important, and we tend to kind of reference it in many ways as throughout the process. So in some ways, we kind of like to hold kind of the final review almost to the last RAC meeting, because we're going to be potentially adding definitions or new terms that require definitions. That said, there's a few items that we wanted to touch on today as we kind of go through this. And the first is, well, again, kind of a placeholder. And we're going to get to this in a little bit, but we have a small grant, is a grant of $15,000 or less for an eligible watershed restoration project. Kind of, we highlighted it here because we're going to talk about it in a little bit. That 15,000, I think, is open to change. Hold your thoughts on that one as we wait till we get to the section itself. This is definitely a placeholder. One other place is in section 4. OWEB staff didn't really like this definition of a program grant, but we may return to it based on discussions today and at future meetings. Because the way it was written, program grant is a grant from OWEB to a small grant team to recommend as eligible. Small grants up to 15,000 within the small grant area. I don't think we actually had program grants was part of the issue here. So that might change, but we wanted to strike it for now as not really being indicative as what was happening on the ground. And we had a little bit of wordsmithing in 5. Which I think better reflects the way program agreements are made. And see a comment.
I can just say it out loud if you like.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I was just looking at the comments you have on the side there and how you have one that says placeholder for potential change, and I was wondering if that's referring to the $15,000 limit or if there's thought about increasing that in light of inflation.
Yes, so that is the placeholder is for the $15,000 cap on small grants, and we'll get to that. We have an idea, I think, to run past you all on how that cap may be implemented in the future here.
Great, look forward to it.
Okay. Okay, so scrolling down to 7. So some of the topics that we're going to be discussing today and in the future, we acknowledge might require more of an administrative role for the small grant teams. So we have yet another placeholder here for holding it for potential compensation for the small grant teams to help meet that administrative role that we think might be required if some of these potential changes to the rules go through.
I have a question, Eric.
Yeah.
This is Karen Stutzman again. I guess I'm a little confused by this sentence. Just because, and maybe I just have all these years been interpreting it wrong, but to me, the de minimis or the 10% fee that you can ask for is that administrative fee as well as like the post grant fee. So are you thinking of adding a new line item in the budget specifically for administrative costs?
I'll respond, Karen, and I'll see if Eric or Kathy have any thoughts on this as well. But what we're thinking is that if we're making changes to the overall small grant program rules that are a little more programmatic in nature and require the small grant teams themselves to have a little more administrative burden than they currently do, then this wouldn't be on, the administration wouldn't be on a specific grant. It would be administration at the program level or at the small grant team level. So there might be opportunities to explore providing compensation to the small grant teams in order to meet these potential new requirements.
Okay, thank you.
But Eric, Kathy, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would just say, just similar to what you said, this one, 7 is really referring to the small grant team. So I think when we see that program, they're really talking about the team. And so when we think of indirect, the 10% de minimis, that's tied to a project. And so that's the indirect for that project or for that applicant / grantee. We're talking here about funds for the administration of the team. So the small grant team contact role, basically.
Okay, it does say that there, but thank you for
well, I would
telling me that.
add as a side note, I people are creative, and I have heard, indirect being used in other ways. So you're right on there that sometimes it works that way that you described it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Karen, for the question. Okay, so I think we're mostly past the placeholders for now. And we're going to actually hopefully slowly kind of go past this next section, the small grant program and administered by small grant teams, the 0020. We want to kind of do this one last for reasons which I hope will make sense once we get there. So we're going to scroll down to the next section, which is 0030, small grant program application.
Oh, did I pass it? Yep.
There you go. Okay. So this is the eligibility, applicant eligibility piece. So as Kathy presented and as we talked about, currently eligible applicants to the LF Small Grant Program are tribes, SWCDs, and watershed councils. And the board interest here was to broaden the eligibility for the small grant program. And one of the ideas that we had was to broaden it to basically who is eligible for other OWEB grants. So this language here is basically word for word from our Division 5 rules, which govern the broad eligibility for OWEB grants. So it essentially would be any entity that is not either an individual person, a state or federal agency, or a for-profit corporation. So I'll stop, see if there are thoughts on this approach. Kelly.
Yeah, I think my only thought is I was trying to figure out earlier was like, oh, about raising, or would there be cost of running the program? And this is like one of the places where I see it creating more of an impact is just because, locally we know all of our partners on our small grant teams. I would say most people in here do. And almost to the point where you can sort of prioritize projects with your partners internally and really be directive with these grants, which has been really important and very valuable. So that's been really great. I also understand the, why you might want to open it up, but then this also, definitely has the possibility to, now maybe you have 15 grants coming in versus 1 or 2 on each of these cycles that now all the board members need to review. So to me, it's just thinking about that, like what are the impacts to the board, the current boards, and the small grant teams, and then the people who are then now running these grants. Now, if it's fiscally going somewhere else, it's not like we're having to do it. It's just the running of the small grant team process, I think. And then I'm assuming doing all the agreements and all that kind of stuff as well. So that is time consuming.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And that we were thinking kind of along the same lines as well.
And just one quick question. The taking out of the acting on behalf of private landowners, was there a specific reason for pulling that out, or I'm just curious why that language was necessarily going away?
Well, we wanted this to match the Division 5, which doesn't state these entities may act on behalf of private landowners. I mean, I think it's sort of implied. Yeah. And just to be clear, oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I
No,
just
please, go ahead,
wanted
Zach.
to ask a question about well, one, have some of these types of groups requested to be involved in the small grant program? For instance, educational institutions, or other not-for-profit corporations, etc. Like, has there been interest from them in being involved?
I can't state, any certainty whether they've expressed interest in being eligible applicants to the program. I'm going to, my hunch is that when, and Kathy, Eric, you can chime in, my hunch is that in the past, if some of these entities did reach out, that they were directed to be in contact with either a tribe, the local tribe, SWCD, or Watershed Council.
My follow-up question to that is, would these groups then be also participating as part of the small grant team? Because that creates, from my recent experience of leading a team for a few years, wrangling the team members to get grants reviewed to begin with can be a challenge. And if we're expanding the teams and wanting everybody to review all the grants, that makes that logistical challenge a little bit harder even.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Zach. And that's actually kind of why we jumped down to this section first, because when we go back up, we'll talk a little bit more about the composition of the small grant team itself. And we have some ideas to run by y'all and see what you think. But we do think that there if we're asking for a potentially broader applicant pool, that might also benefit from having a broader set of small grant, or a broader composition in the small grant teams.
Yeah, this will be interesting. I'm, everything I could run on right now would just be assumptions. So it's hard to think about, but it is like, oh man, would we turn into then almost like a grant making? I mean, I know we kind of technically are, but it could have the potential to turn, each of the organizations into a grant making machine, which we're really not all set up for in a big way, but for the accountability pieces and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not against it. I'm just trying to think about all the things.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Kelly. Nicole, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to reiterate what Kelly said. I do think that there would be, there's already a substantial amount of administrative that goes behind it as it is. So I do think that, and in that piece, something I wanted to bring up later, but I think our 2-week application windows are going to be too tight if we start opening this up, because they're already tight as it is, especially with the change to the online applications. And so I think that administrative piece is a part of it as well.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Karen.
Or if you did open it up to more organizations to participate, could you possibly just limit the number of applications? So once you hit 15 applications, regardless of who it came from, that's the cutoff, something like that, so it doesn't get unreasonable.
Yeah, what do folks think about that? I have a thought, but I'm curious what others think.
Yeah, it seems to me, I don't know if you'd test it first and then set it up, or just set up a top number that you could go with. But there would, I'm on other boards that are grant making, and it has, like, from the fruition when we started where it was like 20 and now there's like 80, and there's still the same amount of 6 people review. You know what I mean? You guys know. There's hundreds of applications, hundreds and hundreds.
It strikes me that, particularly in my region, because I'm up on the North Coast, this wouldn't necessarily open it up to a whole lot more organizations than currently have access where I'm located. So I think the impact is going to be very variable across the state of this idea. Which again, I think that making the program more available to more groups of people is actually likely to be a net positive. But there may need to be some adjustments elsewhere in either our local bylaw sets or in the rules writ large elsewhere, so that maybe there's smaller subdivisions of the small grant team that are involved in reviewing. And so, these 3 people have these 5 applications, and then these 3 have these 5, so that not everybody has to read every application. Or so, I don't know. I'm just speculating right now. Yeah, but there's going to have some pretty variable impacts across Oregon, and some system to manage a potentially significantly higher number of grants that need to be processed while we're doing other work is definitely relevant. So 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Good perspective. Yeah, Nori, see your hand up.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to put a little bit of our take on it. We absolutely love the small grant team. We have a great connection with our landowners. It's amazing, small act of kindness that we can give back. I'm probably preaching to the choir across the board in the aspect of, we're a very small district that does a phenomenal amount of work. I personally love the small grant team. It is an administrative burden, one that I'm more than willing to take because it is a great connection. I will say, as far as I will always be a part of it. I think that there would be a deep discussion depending on how much more work it creates. The big pushback I get from others inside of our district is it takes the same amount of work to do a $15,000 small grant as it takes to do a $200,000 open solicitation grant. For me, it's indifferent. I do both of them. It doesn't really matter. And I love the small grant team, especially connection with landowners. I do think it is something that we should caution on as far as the amount of work for the amount of benefit as far as a district as a whole. Personally, like I said, I love it, but as the best interest of our district, I think is something we will personally have to be careful of, as probably as small as others with minimal capacity.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Nori. Saw a lot of heads shaking and some thumbs up there. Go ahead, Karen.
All right, one last question. So I forget how it goes when a team has expended their $100,000 and then there are other teams around the state that haven't. And I forget how everyone is notified that there's still money left to use. And if that could play into this, too.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Kathy, do you want to respond to that one?
Yeah, so the last few biennia, we have been able to implement the process where we award leftover funds from the previous biennium, funds that were not awarded to projects. We can carry that over, and at the midpoint of the current biennium, we can award that to teams that have expended 95% of their award. So I suppose some of what there is a bit of a lag, I guess, because it's really the funds from the previous biennium that we can add to the teams.
But can you shuffle that around the state, or is it only available to the team that has some leftover?
It's only available to teams that have expended 95% of their current biennium's award. So 95,000. If a team awards grants $95,000 worth of grants by the end of the first year of the biennium, then they are eligible to get that pot of carryover funds. So that could be anywhere throughout the state. Yeah, so it is a reshuffling.
And Karen, the amount of funds available from the previous biennium is just simply split evenly among all of the teams that reach that 95% obligation amount. And we did it really because we saw that a lot of money was just simply being recaptured and put back into the overall web spending pot. And we felt it would be beneficial, since there was uneven use of the funds for those teams that have more demand, to be able to access additional funds rather than just simply recapturing them back into the overall web grant fund.
Thank you for that.
Okay, yeah, good question. I've seen some comments in the chat around the online application, and getting some of the complexities there, and how it might be a little bit time consuming there. We'll talk a little bit today about at least one aspect of reporting, but I don't believe we have something at least in the hopper on the actual application itself. But this is good insight, for future meetings. And welcome, Chris. just to bring you up to speed, we are talking about the potential broadening of the applicant eligibility for the small grant program right now. Okay, other thoughts on this one right now? Jordan, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess, you know, just for the sake of inclusivity and everything, what does OWEB think about opening grants up to landowners? I'm kind of going towards my capacity and small organizations capacity. Personally, I have like 4 or 5 landowners that would like to submit a small grant application, but I just don't have the capacity to help them with it at the moment in time. So maybe that's more of just me needing to work with the landowners to have them write the application for me and help them go through the fiscal administration of it. Maybe I see nodding heads. That's what I should be doing. But I'm just wanted to throw that out. I could see that opening it up to landowners could be an even bigger Michigan burden than just these applications. I just wanted to throw that.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Actually, in the past, we did allow individual people, landowners, to be eligible applicants and grantees for OWEB grants. I think as the complexity of implementing projects has increased over time, and admittedly, some of the reporting and administrative burden has also increased, that became a much less viable position. Landowners were sometimes ill-equipped to implement some projects. I recall some kind of horror stories about projects that were implemented, as well as just simply reporting. It's not often in the bailiwick of landowners to, you know, as it is in your case, on how to request and receive OWEB funding, reporting on grants, etc. So I think it's a good idea to work with landowners on developing the applications themselves, and of course, in the implementation phase of it as well. Okay. So let's move down to something which is maybe a little bit easier, which is this section in 3, which is around technical guidance on the grants or the projects themselves. One of the things that we talked about is, you know, if there's still a need to reference specific guidance, can we list these resources and just stipulate using the latest editions? You know, one example here, I think, is the Guide to Placing Large Wooden Streams. It references a 1995 version. I know that it's been updated since. I think not, maybe not as updated as recent as we would have liked, but I think there's a 2010 version at least. And I think there's, you know, perhaps similar updates that have been made to these listed resources.
Yeah, I think it would be really nice to not have to go back to rules every time that these are updated or changed. And I don't even know, maybe it can just be a list sort of resources and say to use the most updated version. I mean, because you know, I'll gather resources from other places too, but then I'll also need to go to these and then look up how it applies through these as well. So I think there's these and a lot more. So I'm not sure how you want to capture the technical resources, maybe that their agency developed or something, whatever satisfies the ORS.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Other thoughts? What all do you all use for resources? I know NRCS field guides are often pointed to. And do those updates on them? I'm just curious. Yeah.
I don't think that they do, Eric. It's an online tool. And I don't think they put the date each time they update a section. I don't think they do that.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Kelly. So I'm sensing there wouldn't be much heartburn if we just stipulated latest editions of these resources. And I'm also hearing that there's potentially others as well that are being utilized, and maybe we could you know, work on some language to include those in addition to these listed resources. Yeah, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. Just in kind of amplifying Kelly's comment a little bit more around kind of professionally accepted standards, maybe that doesn't appear on the list. We talked about that extensively the last time we redid the restoration rules, and we talked quite a bit about that in that rack, and ended up putting language in the restoration grant rules that basically says professionally accepted standards. The issue there, as I see it anyway, is that with the restoration grants, they're going through some pretty substantial technical review, either by a regional review team or a FIP technical review team. And we don't have that component in the small grant program. So it sounds, to me anyway, a bit more challenging to have something quite that open-ended. But then I couldn't think of an alternative that might work for small grants. And so I came up with a blank. But if anyone has any ideas in that area, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, and we can ponder that as well between RAC meetings and come back with you with some additional language. Okay, yeah, thanks, Kathy. Okay, so moving on down, we got a couple things. I guess maybe a good time to point out that in any rulemaking, we have kind of substantive changes like broadening the applicant pool, and things that are more technical in nature are really just kind of clean up. And this might be a good example here in 5 of cleanup, as the project management budget category no longer exists. And in 6, We also probably have another kind of technical change here. So we might be working on just a little bit of wordsmithing on this, but probably not worth.
Is it worth a conversation or revisiting how we didn't used to have landowners sign off on small grants before we worked out all the kinks? Like, this is a place too where I feel like, at least in our world, like sometimes the small grant team will say, actually, this would be better if you wrote this way. Like, I feel like they want to touch it more than other places too. And even with like little changes. And so then if they tweak something, then it's like we have to go back again and go back and get another landowner signature. Or I think also even like getting back into it online to like change it. I've only had to do it a few times now, but it's happened to a couple of us here where it's like, oh, now we got to go back and then we got to go back. So again, we're usually everybody's on board, but I feel like traditionally before it was online, it was like we had the whole project built, everything would be done. And once the team agreed on it, then we would say, this is great, take it to the landowner, have them sign it because it's a complete project at that point, and then send it out. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And yeah, thanks for joining, Nori. Look forward to seeing you at the next one. Nicole, did you have a response to Kelly's comment there, or something new?
Yeah. On that same line, I agree with Kelly on that. You know, sometimes I'm driving 3 hours one way to do these. So if I don't have a complete package and things change, it's really tough. The way that we navigated to get out around this was just a very boilerplate landowner agreement at the beginning. And then after the grant is funded, then I have a much more detailed landowner agreement, but it would be a whole lot easier if we didn't have to have that extra step in there, especially again, the 2-week application windows kind of, you know, crunch all that together. And so it's been a challenge for sure, trying to navigate that and take the time to do 2 different, you know, landowner agreements.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for those insights. And Kathy, I think you captured that pretty well there. And that's, just to clarify, that's landowner's signature at time of application, correct? Okay.
Correct.
And then
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Oh, and I was just thinking that maybe when you read this a month from now, or when the board reads it later on, consider not requiring landowner signature, timelines and travel, distance cause challenges, when corrections are needed or something like that, when revisions are needed.
Okay. Yeah, it's really good feedback. Thank you all. Okay. So as promised, we're going to go back up to the previous section. There's some good meaty topics there to discuss. So this is section 0020, small grant program administered by small grant teams. Okay, so we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but in 4 here, we talk about the small grant teams. And if we do broaden the applicant eligibility, it would kind of lends itself to think critically about the composition of the small grant teams. And, if we kind of skip over the $15,000 limit here in 4 for a second to discuss the revision in 5. So if one of the goals is to broaden the applicant pool and potentially the small grant team composition, would this revised language here in 5 work with you all? So what we've done is added that members of the small grant team are strongly encouraged to invite individuals with expertise in watershed restoration, in a watershed restoration discipline or other watershed restoration interests to participate on the team. So removing consult with, but participating on the team and its priorities, program elements, and recommendations for project grant awards. So we would be, I think, leaving it to small grant teams because you all know your area better than we do to broaden accordingly. So if there are entities that are doing watershed restoration or potentially want to be doing watershed restoration, you would be strongly encouraged to invite them to participate on the team. So I'll stop and see if there's thoughts on that. Karen.
So I was thinking just with the administrative parts of adding more people to the grant team, would it become the small grant team's responsibility to advertise broadly for that? And if so, that would feed in, I think, to that admin cost. I was just thinking, I don't know what legal constructs OWEB has to abide by, and or whose responsibility it would be to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment, good question, Karen, on like how a small grant team would go about recruiting additional members. And I think doing some advertising would be potentially more preferable than kind of targeted outreach alone. I mean, you could do a combination of, if you know an entity is doing the work, reaching out to them while at the same time doing a little bit more broadly based outreach to see if there's other entities that are interested as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole.
One thing I might add, we're fairly quarterly in this, but if we add more people, one thing that I do get a lot from our partners is, and the folks that I would probably want to invite, a lot of those folks would probably already be maybe serving on the Region 5 review team. But that's a lot of time out of people's, to do and review these projects, and then also participate on it in a team ranking meeting. So maybe if there's a way to go every 6 months on this instead of 8 times in the biennium. I don't know. I'm just thinking adding more people and more people's time. If there's a way to cut that time down, that might help us get more people and broaden our teams.
Yeah, good thought, Nicole. And also maybe hearing a little bit more around, potentially compensation for participating on the team. I think Zach, you had your hand up first, and then Chris.
It strikes me that in a similar fashion to well, I think it was Nicole who was just talking, right? What Nicole just said about people not having a bunch of time for additional review teams to sit on. I anticipate that being a similar issue in my region as well. And in addition to that, it strikes me that with the limit on how much money we can get out of a small grant, the projects tend to not be particularly complicated ones that we get in our region for small grants. And if they are more complicated, more expensive projects, there is another matching grant coming in from somewhere else to cover the lion's share of the cost that is going through somebody else's more extensive review process. And to an extent, I'm not sure we need to invite more expertise into the small grant team for reviewing, just because, I mean, if it's a planting project, then we're pretty darn aware. And if it's a fish passage project, then we're also getting money from somewhere else where it's going through those additional technical reviews from additional experts, right? So yeah, I think that's my whole thought is I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good use of everyone's time. And people can self-select, of course, for that, but it doesn't strike me as being the best use of limited resources to ask them to come in on this as well.
Okay, thanks, Zach. And I have a follow-up question for you, but I want to make sure, Chris, I think you had your hand up. So if you had anything to follow up.
Oh, sorry, just a quick clarifying question. And hi, everyone. I'm Chris Shadell with the Hood River Soil and Water Conservation District. I apologize for being late today. I feel like the first hour of every meeting is like the worst one to miss. So I apologize. But just quick clarification on this. When we're saying small grant team, are we talking the voting members or the people just ranking?
I would assume that it's the voting members of the small grant team.
Okay.
But thanks for that clarifying question. And then I'm gonna follow up on Zach's thought here, and I'm gonna ask maybe a provocative question. So I'm thinking of a world where there's a broader applicant pool, but the same small grant teams. And if a criticism may be, well, you all didn't fund my grant because you're just kind of the small insular group of watershed councils, SWCDs, and tribes. How do I get to be on this team? Because I see, again, I'm being provocative here, but if you all are reviewing grants that other folks on your team are writing. And I don't know how kind of the conflict of interest gets kind of discussed. It might be different with different small grant teams, but a criticism or a concern may be that if the eligible applicant pool broadens, but the small grant team does not, that it might be being perceived as sort of insular. So that's my provocative question there, and I'd be happy to discuss, or you know, if I'm.
I definitely have a thought.
Okay, yeah.
Which is that, you know, in particular, the North Coast Small Grant Team, everybody who is eligible to participate and has decided to participate and apply for grants, they are all also on the review team for our region. And that's a decision that we made in our bylaws, whatever else, right? And so any additional applicants added into the pool would be included in that same team, right? So they would be a part of it as much as we are, which raises some concerns for me about the expertise of the people being added to the pool, right? And I can see how having somebody from NOAA or from ODFW or from ODA or another agency on that team would be helpful. And for us, we have one stream restoration bio out of the Tillamook office that covers everywhere from Astoria up into the upper Nehalem and all the way down. I think Derek covers almost to Lincoln County, maybe even into Lincoln County. But it's this vast area, and he's one man, and like we're all kind of competing for his time to walk streams with us, to lay out wood placements or whatever else is. And I would rather ask for his time doing that and really making really good use of his expertise than reviewing planting projects. And I appreciate that he could be a shield for us, as it were, from criticism. But I think those complaints are going to come up anyway, if they're going to come up.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Kelly, is your hand up?
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking as Zach was talking about the projects, and that's basically all of ours are too, because this money just doesn't go very far anymore, and so it's usually riparian work or fencing, or you know, it's really straightforward. Off-stream water systems, they're always like really straightforward things. And I'm wondering, even with the new, oh wait, this is not affecting small grants, the new section 106. I'm just thinking like all this stuff is you're going to start to limit out even more of what we can do. But I think I heard in that webinar, now that it just hit me, that the small grants weren't separate money. Anyway, you know, and we've gotten around it here too. I guess I would say that, you know, our workaround is the opposite of Zach's. Like, none of us vote. We have a small grant team that's made up of all the people that we've pulled from different agricultural communities and from all across the county and those kind of things. But myself and Liesl and Robbie and no one within our team has a vote. So it's the opposite of that. So that's how we've set it up. So I think it wouldn't be an issue to have more people voting necessarily. Although our team is mostly made up of, you know, council and SWCD constituents. So there is still a lean to it.
Yeah. Great, thanks. Karen.
Well, I was just thinking that for newer small grant teams that don't have a lot of technical experience, that this is good for them to and engage, to have them think that, oh well, maybe we should invite an expert because I'm brand new at this, or I only have a couple of years experience, and it would help our team grow. So it's,
Yeah.
it just depends on the length of time that that team's been working together, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And I think it's definitely as kind of the experience that Zach and Kelly have described here. It's going to be different across the small grant teams. And I don't think we would want to, require, say, ODFW to participate to review small grants, particularly given the pressing needs for their time with other grant review processes. But if there's areas where there are other entities that are doing restoration or conservation work in your area that would also be potential applicants to the small grant program, it might make a lot of sense to invite them to participate on the team if they have that expertise already. So with that, I mean, is there heartburn with the revised language in the subsection 5 here? Yeah, Eric.
Thanks. Yeah, I paused because it's not a heartburn issue, but I had a question for the group. And it's around technical review. Given the structure of the program, it's very much checklist oriented. Here's the list of eligible practices. Here's the list of manuals that you need to design to. And it's intentionally that way, so that there isn't a great need for the kind of technical review that we bring in through other program offerings. And so I'm thinking that this language around strongly encourage is fine for that gives teams space to bring in expertise from, say, agency staff. And I guess I'm wondering around, we're kind of dancing around this topic of, it sounds like we do have consensus with kind of the board's opinion that, yeah, we probably should be expanding eligibility to at least apply for a small grant. But that's one issue. The next issue then is, do we invite them on the team? Eric just suggested that if you have other eligible applicants, that they probably should be invited to the team. And that may or may not create issues around what was discussed before. Kelly talked about how in that team, the eligible applicants don't even vote; other people do. Zach said the opposite. They work well together. They understand the system. I'm just kind of curious where the group is at. Like, if we're okay with expanding eligibility to just simply apply, where's the group at around expanding the circle of the team itself? And we will get to whether or not we can pay for that administrative work too. But I'm just kind of curious where the group is around expanding the circle of the team itself.
Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, I'm only going to say this, and then I want other people to speak because I apologize for speaking a lot. I think, again, I would just come with that my only other, the interesting issue around this of like opening it up to a lot of other applicants is that also I feel like our small grant team is sort of mimicked around like the mission of the SWCD. and the watershed councils. And so it is really like agricultural based, or and obviously that's going to be different all around the state, but we do tend to pick, it seems like the projects that come through are ones that really go towards our mission. So I was just thinking of an example in my head, like say the trail keepers, want to then apply and do trail maintenance work or something. So, there's nothing wrong with that project, and I'm sure it's going to reduce sediment and all these kind of things, but I'm just wondering, how, when you open it up, does it expand outside of your mission of the SWCD, and is that okay with everyone there? Does OWEB have anything to say about that? Or is that just, will be directive from OWEB to like, now we need to consider all of the projects in the pie? Anyway, just thinking about how that could, could some of it go against wherever you're headed with your SWCD mission? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Kelly. And I think where I would fall back on there is simply the eligibility of project types, right? Is if it's doing one of these things that we have in the rules, whether it's from the perspective of a group that's trying to protect their trails versus people trying to protect some sort of wildlife habitat, we do have a water quality element that the erosion piece, can certainly fit into. Where we can't go is, a grant for something that's simply not eligible for OWEB funds, like a grant to build a trail network. We want to bring economic activity, establish mountain bike trails. Great idea, but that's not something OWEB can fund. And so I think that our project eligibility criteria should handle that.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Well, let's go Zach, Nicole, and then Chris.
I'll try and be brief. I'm just thinking through how this idea of expanding is going to play out likely in the North Coast, and what organizations and groups might participate. And frankly, our team won't change a whole lot, right? We might pick up some land trusts that want to get involved. We might pick up some extension offices potentially, but by and large, our landscape isn't going to change a whole lot. And I think it's an advantage in them being involved in the team and reviewing projects, because in a lot of cases, the councils, the soil water conservation districts, were the ones who are coming to this work with the expertise. And some of those other groups don't necessarily have the same depth of expertise in this work that we do. And so it could be a great educational opportunity for some of these groups to start putting together better projects, if they have access to reviewing more projects and seeing more projects writ large. Though I also will say that the added complications we've been discussing of needing to involve more technical reviewers, or wanting to involve more technical review to shield from potentially being accused of conflicts of interest in what grants are getting funded or not, feels like it's making getting $15,000 really complicated, and like, which inclines me against the idea of broadening the scope, of broadening the pool, just because the added complication feels like it's, again, I don't think it's going to change our landscape a whole lot, but I feel like it might add complication that makes that $15,000 a lot less worthwhile pursuing than other offerings. So I'm done.
All right, thanks, Zach. Nicole.
Yeah, for us, I don't think our small grants team the composition would change much, just because we don't have a lot of other entities out here. However, kind of like Eric said, if we're inviting them to apply and then they're not, I mean, I guess my whole thing is I'll invite, and if they want to participate, great. And then awesome, they're on the team. And if they don't, then it's kind of like, well, you were invited and now you don't have say so. So I guess for me, just opening it up kind of saves me as a coordinator for the small grant team. If somebody was to come up to me and be like, well, why can't I be on the team? It's simple, you know, it's like, well, you can, and this is the process. So kind of helps with that. And one other piece to that, we have 2 other forms, like review forms that we use. And that really is kind of our small grants team gets together and really weights the projects based on our priorities and eligibilities. So it takes a lot of that, like, I don't know, personal bit out of it to say, well, the small grant team doesn't like me. No, all grants are weighted by a number through those 2 additional review sheets. And so that, you know, it's like, so that kind of takes the anonymity out of it too. But I don't know. My personal feeling is open it up, and then if they want to be on there, great. And if they don't, then they've had the opportunity to, and there's no room to complain later. Does that make sense? So.
Yeah, that does. Thanks, Nicole. And I think that kind of is in line with the way I was thinking of this too, is you probably, as a small grant team, wouldn't want to have like every eligible applicant be on your small grant team. And I'm thinking of an example here of, say, a local Eagle Scout or Boy Scout troop is a nonprofit. You know, I know some of them are. They would be eligible, and maybe one of their projects is doing a small riparian project with a landowner. They would be eligible to apply as an applicant, and they might have a great project. You may or may not see them as having a lot of riparian expertise, though, and may not be experienced enough to want to participate on a small grant team to evaluate or review projects anyway. So it'd be perfectly fine as applicants, but maybe not as participating on the team itself. Chris, I think you had your hand up. Or did your question or concern that already addressed? Okay, sounds like it. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Discuss this, but did you guys define like what opening up eligibility would mean specifically? Did you guys call out like different entities specifically, or was it just kind of wide open?
I think it would be along the lines of kind of at small grant team conducting a little bit of broad outreach, while potentially also reaching out to entities that they know might be interested.
Or I mean, I guess more for applicants, like would opening up eligibility mean including like private land? Did you guys define those entities of who that is?
Who would be eligible to apply?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would be in line with other OWEB grants. So
okay.
Basically, everybody would be eligible except for individual people, state and federal agencies, for-profit businesses. And I think we also made a change last time around in our Division 5 that this would, I'm sure, not apply to small grants, but if you're a out-of-state public institution, you're a public education institution, you're not eligible for OWEB grants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good discussion here on this topic. This is a meaty one. I'm sensing a little bit of concern here, but maybe it's okay to move forward as is for right now. So I do want to talk a little bit, moving up to 4, about the $15,000 cap that we currently have. So we've heard, somebody brought it up earlier. We've obviously all experienced inflation over the past few years and what that has done to, trying to implement projects and the challenges incurred. One idea we've been kicking around is, as a part of the OEB board spending plan that comes up for adoption every biennium, usually in July, we would potentially here add as a part of the spending plan item for the board's consideration would be to change this to not a $15,000 cap, but the maximum amount adopted by the board at the start of the biennium. So the OEB board would determine what that rate would be.
I think that's fine if we could say like what the OEB board says, no less than 15. Like, can we set a minimum, but then let them expand on wherever they need to go? Or at least maybe back, not beyond the 10. I don't know. We're making some wins here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, maybe we'll experience some rapid deflation and have to address that at some point. But yeah, interesting observation. Thank you, Kelly. Nicole, see your hand up.
Would we still be at that $100,000 cap for the biennium? I mean, I guess that's my big question, because if we come in and let's say we can up it to 20,000, then that changes the whole dynamic. I could probably, we can probably eat up 5 grants in no time, in a couple of application periods. And so I guess that would be the question for me. Would it be awesome to increase that? Absolutely. Most of the projects we do are water quality improvement. So it's no secret that pipe prices quadrupled. And so I just don't have the interest in the small grants program that I did, but I know that if the cap was increased, it'd be like wildfire. So I guess if it's all going to be relative based on however much is allocated per team per biennium on that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Eric, Kathy, do you have any thoughts on kind of the overall amount that's allocated?
Yeah, well, I do. I'm sure Kathy does too. And it hasn't increased in quite some time, if ever, if I think about it. And the last time we changed the cap was the last time we went through the rulemaking process, and it went from 10,000 to 15,000. And at that time, there was no increase in the overall amount of funding. And I think there's a balance to strike here, recognizing, of course, as Nicole mentioned, certain project types have just simply gotten more expensive. I think our intent here was to try to find a way that we can incorporate just, annual inflation without having to do something as complicated as putting like a CPI calculation factor in here, and doing that every year. We could just do it through the board spending plan every 2 years. And, my sense of it is if inflation was let's be optimistic, 3% in the next, 2 years, then, maybe the board would look at, 3% a year, 6% for 2 years. Maybe we multiply 15,000 by 6% and increase it to that. I think that's what we were thinking about in trying to find a way to be able to increase the cap without having to wait for an every 5 years rulemaking process. Really was I think our thinking and our goal here. But I think there probably would be support on the board for increasing the overall amount, particularly if we start talking about providing funding for the team to do their work. And we've talked internally about that if we were going to recommend that, we would be recommending to our board that they not carve that out of the 2.8 million, but rather add it to the 2.8 million that's there. But of course, that's a separate issue than what's the overall pot for the grants. But I think over time, it probably should be increased. That has happened in other areas like the weed grant program due to lots of input to our board. The amount put into the spending plan was increased, I think a couple of bienniums ago. I can't remember exactly when now, but that happens. They're just, it's something that the board has to do every 2 years, is balance out, what their priorities are. And, for example, when we've talked with the board over the years about the focused investment line item, that conversation was around what proportion of the overall spending plan should we be allocating to focused investments. And, I think the board would look at every item the same way. But I agree with Nicole. If it becomes 20,000, like if the board says after we do these rules and then whatever the succeeding biennium is, yeah, let's make it 20,000. We would have that conversation with them. Well, at the current funding level, that means the team's only going to do 5 projects. How does that feel? And I think the discussion would have to be framed that way, and then the board would have to arrive at what they think is appropriate for the spending plan. But again, our intention was just simply to provide an inflationary factor here. So Kathy, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think you captured it really well there, Eric. I don't have much to add.
Great. I think we've got some good notes here on this particular element. If we do keep it with the revised language, I think as Eric said, we would definitely want to make sure the board understands, what that would entail. And also, of course, the administrative cost to the program team. So these are all good points that are being raised today. Okay. So Kathy, if you want to scroll down, we've got maybe a few other things.
Nicole has her hand up also.
Oh, Nicole, sorry.
No, sorry, I forgot to take it down. Sorry.
Okay. So I think we just made a note. Again, maybe not, just kind of a placeholder in 13. And placeholders might be even too strong a word, but the board just did adopt some new climate related evaluation criteria. Of course, the small grant teams develop your own evaluation criteria, so these don't directly apply. But we are going to be doing some revisions to the application itself to maybe include a little bit of the climate related language. So we might insert a little bit of language in here as well, but I think it'll mainly be in the application and in the review materials. Let's see, I think we've got a little bit of cleanup in 15, as well as 16. And then in 18, here's I think a good one. We promised to talk about reporting a little bit here. So we do have in the current rules a summary biennial report is due and addresses all these things that are listed here, and all the various lowercase a's and uppercase a's, b's, and c's. So I wanted to discuss with you all, what you all are doing with the biennial report, if it's a useful exercise for you, and if there's any other mechanism that might work, if anything, that would kind of suffice as a reporting mechanism from the team to OWEB.
Is this something that the reports you're getting, I'm just wondering what the trigger is. Is it OWEB needs more, or is it that you're trying to figure out a good tool for us to just be able to everyone's kind of using the same thing and it's useful for everyone? I'm just kind of curious where this came from.
The language originally, all this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't really speak to where this originated from. It's looking at the history here. It's been around, since early days. And when we amended the rules, we didn't touch it. So,
I mean, it's something that if from doing these reports, I mean, it's like the list and how much it was and yes or no. So, I mean, I think for us, it is a good, it's easy to do, and it's a recap for everybody there to go back and look. We also do field trips with our small grant team to past projects as well. Stuff like that is happening on this end, but I think the lists that you have are not onerous and are helpful.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Zach, is your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm gonna echo that it's not a particularly onerous report currently, and frankly, we just the various cycles of our team and various leaders we've had pretty much just take whatever the previous biennial report was and modify it to match the current, biennium. So you're not getting a lot of information out of us, and you're not asking for a lot, and it's not particularly onerous to put together. I think that you're getting more information out of the grant completion reports from each individual grantor. And I mean, to an extent, it's not onerous. There's not a lot of information. Is it necessary? And I know that there has to be some sort of check and balance on giving us $100,000 to distribute amongst ourselves. I acknowledge that. And also, if it can be streamlined even further, that seems fine, because the important information is coming from project completion reports out of each of the small grants themselves, not out of this biennial report. The biennial report doesn't really say a whole lot. And so that's, yeah, I don't know if it is really all that relevant of a report to produce.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. We identified that as well, so we can query Augmentus or OWRI for some of this information as well. Nicole and then Karen.
I agree. I think it's just kind of puts a bow on the small grants for the biennium. I use it in annual reports or to my board. You know, they like to see this information. So I think it's you know, good. Another thing is the reason why I like that report is that it gives us an opportunity to kind of say what went well and what didn't go well. So I feel like that's kind of some feedback to you guys at OWEB that we may not have otherwise. So, I mean, honestly, I think it's, like I said, it kind of just puts a bow on the biennium and closes it out. So.
Great. Okay. Karen?
I think that Nicole said what I was going to say, that a lot of times you can use it in other areas of reporting that you have to do for your board or whatever, annual meetings, things like that. So.
Okay. And maybe this is a question for you, Karen, but is this discussed at all at the Soil and Water Conservation Commission?
Not
meeting?
yet.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't actually realize this was something they were, you know, like I'm the liaison for them, and I haven't seen this report. Like, it's not forwarded to an email that I would get it. But I started to think about, well, how would they use it? And I think it would be nice to give to the individual commission members that represent, you know, their areas of the state, so that they can see the work that's going on. It's a good indicator of what is being put on the ground. If it's easy to pass to them, I don't know if it would be easy to do that.
Yeah, I see Kelly has a comment. So, mea culpa.
Right. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it sounds like, you know, that this is not too onerous for folks, and that there's some utility here. I think we're open to keeping it. And, you know, potentially if there's any streamlining language, we could explore that as well.
well, or just take out the commission part.
Or take out the commission.
Because if there's not, you know, like, then you'd have to like ask all the 45 SWCDs, hey, don't forget to send it to the commission, you know, as another little thing they have to do, which is, I mean, if I can compile that information somewhere else, I can do that. I don't have to bug people to do it for me.
Hey, Eric?
Okay. Yeah, Kathy.
I can't find my hand raise function, so I'm just going to say this is my fault. And anyone who's saying mea culpa, no, this is absolutely my fault for not having this process fine-tuned and in place. So it's not on the teams in this case.
Well, that's very kind of you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy.
I think, you know, if we do keep this language and, you know, or something to its effect, we could, OWEB does have a liaison to the Soil and Water Conservation Commission, and maybe it could be included in an update from OWEB to the commission in the future, if that works better than keep it in here in rule.
Well, I guess I'm just thinking, sorry, I'm talking without raising my hand, that, you know, then wouldn't they want a summary of all the grants from OWEB that go to every section of the state? You know, like, here's how much money's going on the ground over here and over here. Why don't I talk with Barbara, the chair, and ask them how if they want this or something different How about that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Did we
Okay.
skip over the climate part before, or were we not? Did I just
I kind of skipped over it because I made just a note
looks meaty.
here because we might include some language related to climate somewhere in these rules, but I think generally speaking, the change would come not in the rules, but in the application and review materials, which would not necessarily link back to this set of rules. So it's more or less kind of a placeholder.
Because it's more or less like a board decision versus a RAC decision. Just trying to, or not a decision, but a recommendation, I should say. Sorry.
It's actually kind of neither, because the evaluation, the climate related evaluation criteria don't apply to small grants, because small grants have the small grant teams actually develop your criteria. But we want to make sure that there's that at least the spirit of that gets into the small grant program, and that would be through the application and then the review documents as well. So there might be some areas that we could include it in the rules, but we haven't thought too much about it right now. Okay, so and the last thing here is in section 20. Kathy has a note about the records retention policy, and that's a kind of a state administrative rule around records retention. And I think we'll just want to make sure that we make sure that whatever we're asking the small grant teams to retain matches up with state retention requirements. And that's pretty much it for what we wanted to discuss with the RAC today. And yeah, thanks, Kelly. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns on these first few sections of the rules?
I'm gonna just make a quick little pin, and I know we're kind of going over it, but the climate stuff, I think having language that supports the climate criteria and all of that is really important. I just wouldn't want sometimes these small grants, like several people have on here already said that you know, a lot of these grants are like landowner relationship building grants. A lot of times they're starts, they're bridges, they're like little pieces to begin getting those bigger climate projects on the ground. So I just am cautioning, I wouldn't want it to see it go to the full level where it's like explain like in full climate terms how this fence is going to make the difference, like those kind of things. So anyway, just a little quick pin. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly.
I obviously have opinions too. And I think having a question in the application, ensuring that applicants are considering climate change in their project design is a worthwhile like thing to have there, because in particular, I'm on the coast. A lot of our ag producers are down in and around the estuary. And that's similar for a lot of the watershed councils along the coast. And so in that context, you know, you have to be considering sea level rise impacts and changes in planting zone might be relevant to people more inland or something. I haven't really thought too hard about work there because I'm not doing it, but making sure that applicants are considering ways in which climate change might impact their project and its development and in whether or not it's going to achieve its goals. That could be a useful question to have on the application. And I also echo that we don't want to make it be too big a thing, because a lot of our agricultural partners are a little less excited to talk about climate change than the rest of us might be.
Yeah, noted. And I think that would be the extent of largely what we would be talking about doing, is maybe incorporating a little bit of language into the questions. But I fully hear you both, Zach and Kelly, on that. Okay. There's a couple things looking at our agenda. One, we have a break scheduled, but I also noted earlier that we didn't have any written comments, public comment received. We have a few people that are on the meeting that are observing, and I want to make sure we have some space for verbal public comment if anybody wants to provide that. We have a little bit of a wrap up. It's not going to take nearly as long as what we have on the agenda, so we'll definitely be out of here by 4 o'clock. So before we take any break, I want to see if there's anybody listening in from the public that wants to provide comment. If you do, please raise your hand. Okay, not seeing any there. So we'll just go straight to kind of the wrap up, and we'll get out of here a little bit early. So first, really appreciate the discussion today. It's awesome. We're going to take the notes that Kathy recorded here. We'll make some revisions to the sections that we talked about today and get it out to y'all before the next meeting, which I think is on December 18th. And then we're going to get into some of the later sections as well. I know we just did the first few today. Actually made it through almost half the actual page length of the rules. We'll be going back, particularly to things like definitions. So don't fear if there's something in any of these sections that you think you really want to come back to. We will be coming back at later meetings. So I expect to see something from us, probably no later than a week before the next RAC meeting on the 18th. But if there's anything that you want to discuss with, I think, any of us between now and then, please feel free to shoot any of us an email. I'm happy to hop on a call or a Zoom, chat through any of this. So, Eric, Kathy, anything from my web staff that I'm leaving out?
No, big thank you to everyone. Great conversation.
Okay. Any other questions from the RAC? Awesome. Okay, well, thank you all. Like I said, look forward to chatting again with you here in about 3 weeks, and hope you all have a good start to your winter here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.